Hello, welcome to Sweet Cheese. Here we have a very special guest with us today. It's His Holiness Dhirasanta Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj, welcome to the show. Right, so we've heard like a lot about you. Maybe you could say something about yourself. How did you join the movement?
Yeah, I was in one day I was in my parents' home. I was a hippie, and I came specifically to watch Top of the Pops. Since I was 16, I had left home. I had my own apartment, living with some other persons, but every so often I would go home. And as I say, specifically watch Top of the Pops. And this particular day, I was waiting for number one to be announced. And when they were announced, I got a very big surprise. Because it wasn't a hippie band, it was the Krishna devotees. They were in number one spot, and they sat down and chanted the Hare Krishna mantra. So initially I was thinking, well, this must be a joke. But it was no joke. They were there several weeks in a run, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And little did I know at that time that I was being purified by that sound, so a seed was being planted within my heart, and that one day I would become a devotee. 1 year passed, and I saw in a friend's house, I was visiting a friend one night, we were engaged in forbidden fruits, and as I left his house, I saw an album on the table, and I asked him, what is this album? He said, oh, I don't know. Someone gave it to me, and you can have it if you like. And what it was the Radha Krishna London Temple album, which George Harrison had asked the devotees to come back to the studio since the Hare Krishna mantra was a success. So he wanted to publish or produce an album with many songs, many chants. So it became the Radha Krishna London Temple album or something like that, with the Radha Londonishwar on the cover. So I took the album home, and I played it, and I played it, and I played it. And I realized at some point I wasn't playing anything else but this album. And specifically, I was very impressed with the Govinda prayers. That was my favorite chant or bhajan on the album. A little while after that, I went to London, and in London I got a job. I was cleaning rich people's homes. There was a company which employed people to go to different homes and clean their homes while they were working. So some of those persons were very rich people and very famous people. One of the houses that I went to was the house of Spike Milligan. And I would have long conversations with his wife. And she was telling me that they both regularly go to India. And she was explaining, what she liked about India. And, at that time, it was an interesting subject for hippies. We were turning to the East for answers to the questions of everyday life. Anyway, it wasn't long also that I saw the Hare Krishna devotees on the street. They looked a little strange because in those days they didn't have the dhoti and kurta and sari as we know it today. From what I understood, they would go to Marks and Spencer's and purchase some sheets and dye them a yellow color, and that's what they were. Somehow they wore that, and they chanted on the street. At first, I didn't really take much notice of them. I thought that they were a little crazy to come out on the street in that fashion. But then I was thinking, they're coming out every day. There must be a reason why they're doing it. Why are they coming out on the street every day? And then I met a devotee who gave me an invitation card. He gave me a Back to Godhead magazine and an invitation to the Sunday Love Feast. So it was free, and I took advantage of that. I remember the Sunday that I came to the temple on that invitation, and I opened the door from the street to walk into the temple. And I still remember to this day this overwhelming spiritual atmosphere hitting me in the face. And I was thinking, wow, this is different. This is something different. And it wasn't just the atmosphere, it was also the smell of incense, the smell of food being cooked in ghee and spices. So it was very, in one sense you could use the word opulence. There was some opulence there which I'd never experienced before. And although I didn't really understand the talk, and maybe the kirtan a little bit too loud, but I did really appreciate the feast, because in those days the devotees would really go out of their way to prepare, true Vedic preparations, and cook and offer with a lot of bhakti. So when you actually ate these preparations, you would walk away feeling spiritually charged. Prabhupada himself would say that when you first come to the temple, you should eat as much as you like. And he said that you can even walk away like a duck walks, meaning that, there's no limit to how much you should eat in the beginning, because it's so spiritually rewarding. So I took advantage of that, because the devotees said that I could come every Sunday, and even at some point they even said you can come for lunch too. So I thought, well, why not? It's all free. And I came, and I basically for 3 months, that was all I did, was to come and take prasadam. But one day I was coming from the temple and returning to my apartment in London, and I was on the top of a double-decker bus. There was no one there, and I was just minding my business, and suddenly something very mystical happened, which was, it was almost like not within my power to even stop. And that was that I started to chant. It was almost like my lips and my tongue were being controlled. And I started to chant without any, desire to do it really. And once I started chanting, I actually couldn't stop. So I was chanting all evening. The next morning I came back to the temple, and I said to the devotees, I have a problem. And they asked what was the problem, and I said, well, I keep chanting your mantra and I can't stop. And they also laughed. And one devotee said, do you know what you've been eating the last 3 months? And I said, well, good food, good vegetarian food. And then he said, no, it's not just good vegetarian food. This is karma-free food, and it's called prasadam, and prasadam means Krishna's mercy. and it's non-different than Krishna. So you've eaten so much prasadam that your tongue is now being purified, and now Krishna is personally dancing on your tongue to induce you to chant. So that's actually how I first met the devotees, and from there on I started to chant regularly and read the Bhagavad Gita, come to the evening programs. And one day, because this is in Berry Place, as you come in the door to Berry Place, there's stairs working their way up to the other ashrams. And there was one devotee sitting on the bottom step, and he was talking to me, answering some of my questions. I was still a hippie, long hair, beard, mustache. In those days we really felt that we were something special, that if we weren't God, then we soon would be. It's just a matter of time. And the interesting thing was that suddenly he actually bowed down right at my feet, this devotee it was Kishore, Kishore, the Prabhupada disciple Kishore from Scotland. So he suddenly bowed down right at my feet. And I was thinking, wow, he really understands. He understands me. But when he got up, he said, did you see my guru? And it was Prabhupada. He had come from his room to the bathroom. He crossed the corridor on the first floor. And of course I was a little disappointed, and he wasn't actually bowing to me at all. He was bowing to his spiritual master. But he said, if you want to come and see him, he's giving a Bhagavad Gita class tonight. And it starts at 7:30. So I did come, but because, as hippies are, we don't have any time concept. It's we have a philosophy of being free spirits, and we do what we want when we want. So I didn't arrive at 7:30, I arrived at 8 o'clock in the evening. And by that time, Prabhupada had already started his class. When I walked into the temple room, Prabhupada was on the left side on his Vyasasana, and Radhalanda and Ishwara were on the opposite side, on the right side. And I decided to sit as far back. And I was right next to the deities. There was just one rope separating us. And I sat there, and I was looking at the devotees and looking at Prabhupada. And immediately I became very offensive in one sense, because I was questioning why the young boys and girls there were listening to an old man. Because from the hippie point of view, the older generation hadn't done anything fair to the world. And we were the younger generation, and we were going to make some changes for the best. And that was how I calculated my first, experience within the temple. But it wasn't long before the devotees actually started to turn in my direction. And I really couldn't figure out why that was. Why they're looking at me suddenly. And this went on for, a good 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Every so often devotees turning in my direction. And, then I understood actually what the problem was, because I hadn't changed my socks in 8 or 9 days, and my feet were smelling quite bad. And I think it was Leela Shakti actually, or someone, one of the Bajaris, got up and, didn't light one incense stick. She had a bunch of sticks in her hand. She lit the whole bunch just to counteract the smell of my feet. And so there I was sitting there, a little embarrassed. And And then Prabhupada finished his class and went up to his room. And then a devotee came up to me and asked me if I wanted to return again. And I said, yes, why not? And he said, well, could you please change your socks before you come? That would be ideal. So from that day on, I've had clean feet and clean socks. So it was my first lesson in Krishna consciousness. And as I reflect on it now, how stupid I was to think that Prabhupada was an ordinary person and could do nothing in regards to changing the world. Now I reflect on it, and I see how fallen I was, to even suggest that I could be better than Prabhupada, or I could offer something better to the young people of the world. But this is the illusion. You can't even wash your feet, and you're thinking yourself so special. So here's Prabhupada, a humble Vaishnava devotee. He was so special because he spread bhakti where bhakti had never been spread before. And therefore, even as an acharya, even as a spiritual master and acharya, he was unique because he did something which none of the others had ever done before. To turn a Vaishnava to turn a Vaishnava into a Vaishnava. And then at some point I was getting very, very, very attracted to Krishna consciousness, and I even asked the local sannyasi who was at that time Rabhatanandan Swami. I asked him, so how do I know if I should be a devotee or not? Who's going to tell me? And he said, no one will tell you. You'll know from within your heart, you will know whether you want to be a devotee or not. So I felt that, very comforting in the sense that, I was the one that's going to make the decision on this. And even one devotee did ask me, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I would like to be a devotee, but I have one last desire. And that is to go to India to see if this is all true. And he said, well, don't waste your time because India's come to you. Don't waste your time and waste your money. But that desire was so strong in me that I decided to go anyway. And I hitchhiked down through Europe, down to Istanbul. Istanbul during that time, this is 1971, probably around September 1971. And, Istanbul was the gateway to India, back and forth, from east to west and west to east. And so, basically that's where you met all the hippies and you negotiate rides to India, either by bus or by lorry, there were different options. And I got as far as Afghanistan. By that time I had stopped chanting, I had started taking drugs again, and I was in Afghanistan in a place called Kandahar, and in a hotel. And I was really reflecting on, what would I actually learn if I did go to India? With these, traveling with hippies, what would I learn from them? And it seemed a very daunting idea to to be in that kind of situation where you're traveling with people that have no knowledge, and I'd already met devotees. They were full of knowledge and full of hope and direction. And I left that association, and I felt that I was going in the wrong direction, even though it was towards India. I couldn't adjust to the fact that I would then actually go on to India and just travel with hippies. So I made a conscious decision to return back to London and join the temple. On the way back, I was on a train from Istanbul to London, and I decided to stop in Munich to see if there were any devotees. There was, by that time there were devotees in Europe, in different places. And I decided to go to the town center to see if there was anyone there. And it wasn't long before I heard drums and cartels, and it was just an amazing experience. That it was almost like Krishna guided me in that situation, that I saw the devotees in the town square chanting and dancing. And I came up and I paid my full dandabats, and it looked a little strange because, I was a hippie, and I was thinking, wow, who's this? So I introduced myself. I'm Bhakta Dave. I'm from the London Temple. And they said, well, you better come with us. And I went to their storefront, and I remember in that kirtan there was several devotees who are, still in the movement. There was Avinash Chandra, who's now Bhakti Vaibhava Swami, and there was Sachinandana, Brahmachari Sachinandana Maharaj, and there was one other who is also a sannyasi. He was there also. So anyway, they brought me back to their storehouse, and you can imagine what it was like suddenly associating with devotees again, taking prasadam. I was the first morning during the breakfast, there was prasadam being served. Most of us had porridge, but Sachinandana Brahmachari, he had a halava. He had a pot of halava. And I was asking the other devotees, how come he's got halava and we have porridge? I said, well, he distributed the most books yesterday, most magazines, so this is his reward. So I was looking at the halava and my tongue was just drooling. I had taken halava for 3 months, So I asked the devotees, is he going to share some of that halava? No, you don't share your pot of halava once you've won it. So he had the whole pot himself. Anyway, it was wonderful to be with devotees, and I stayed with them for 1 week. And then there was a group of them going to Hamburg, and I traveled with them. In Hamburg, I also met Smita Krishna Brahmachari, who's Smita Krishna Maharaj now, from Sweden. I stayed there also a week, and the temple president's wife would bribe me every day that she would take some of my hair for some pineapple bread that she used to make. So she was like bribing me.
Some of your hair?
Hair. So I had long hair. So she would come up and she would say, "Bhakta Dave, would you like some pineapple bread today?" So I said, well, why not? So then she would go like this.
You were paying her in hair?
Huh?
You paid her in hair?
Was that?
You paid her in hair for the bread?
Yeah, she cut some hair and she gave the bread. She did this every day, 5, 6 days. And then she wanted to shave me up, and I said, well, actually I've got to speak to my parents, and I don't want to frighten them too much. I'm originally from Plymouth, so it's a kind of southwest England. They're very simple people. So I didn't want to, overdo it. So I said, just let me keep what I've got now. And she said, fine, it's fine. You've done very well. So then I left there and went to England and went to my hometown, stayed a week there, and then I joined the temple. So that was how I became a devotee. Kind of a roundabout way, but I got there.
Well, yeah, that's an amazing story. So a lot has changed, like in ISKCON since then. Would you like to speak about some of the pros and cons of like what ISKCON is in the future and what it is now?
Obviously, in those early days, the society wasn't very mature. We were like babies, and we made a lot of mistakes. So on the downside, immaturity meant there were mistakes, and we had to learn from those mistakes. Probably better that we were the guinea pigs, and we made the mistakes, so that today, those mistakes have been learned, and they don't make the same mistakes. But I think that's always in an institution. You have to go through the school of hard knocks and learn from your mistakes. Of course, there is an English saying, failure is the pillar of success. So as long as you understand the failures and try to correct them, then it's not really so bad. I think the society has changed a lot. The GBC used to fight in their meetings. They used to come out from their meetings completely exhausted. And they didn't really get anywhere because of fighting. Nowadays I see that the GBC body is very mature, very calculative in their decisions, even though there is a lot of different persons within the GBC body. Still they come to conclusions and they make resolutions without fighting, and I think that's a very positive step forward. Also the sannyas ashram. I'm a sannyasi. I've been a sannyasi for 3 years. But to become a sannyasi today is not so easy. It's not like before, where Prabhupada gave sannyas to whoever wanted it. And again, we made a lot of mistakes in the ashram. I think prior to the changes that the ministry made, and I think it was I'm not sure the date, was it 1985 the changes took place? Prior to that, there were something like 55% fall downs in the sannyas ashram.
How many?
55%. And now, I spoke with Prahlādananda Maharaj recently. He said that today there's only 5% fall down. So that's a major change in the renounced order. And that is because we're monitored. I was on the sannyas waiting list for 3 years, and I know what it was like. The monitoring was quite severe. we were not going to become sannyasis if there was any indication that we were not qualified to take on that responsibility. So that's another change that's taken place for the better. Some of the things that have declined, I'd like to mention some of those. Maybe some devotees would not consider that they're so bad, but I have a personal feeling that they're not changes which Prabhupada would like, and that is the Sunday feast. You know, the fact that the Sunday feast was so opulent that you had to come back. It was not like, shall I go, shall I not? You went because you knew what you were going to get. So I counted, there were 15 preparations. And I can even quickly go through them. 2 sabjis made from ghee and spices. Pushpan rice. Pushpan rice means rice with all the spices. Cheese balls, coconut wedges, raisins, peas, cashew nuts. Prabhupada called Pushpan rice a feast in itself. And there was koftas, there was raita, there was samosa or pakora, there was puris that puffed up, there was chutney, there was laddu, there was sweet rice, there was halava, there was shrikam, sometimes melpura, and a nectar drink. It's 15 preparations. And you know, they were opulent preparations. They were done so. Prabhupada personally taught Jamuna Devi, Rabhatinandan Swami. So many devotees had learned personally from Prabhupada how to prepare Vedic preparations. And,
who cooked the Sunday feast?
Well, Rabhatinandan Maharaj would cook. Bal Gopal would also cook. She was also a good cook. Dhananjaya's wife. Yeah, I mean, we all actually had our own little preparation that we would make. I would make pushpan rice every Sunday. That was my main preparation that I did. And you know, once Prabhupada was in Hyderabad, and this was of course sometime around 75, and the temple had already been completed and the deities were installed. And at one point Prabhupada came back to the temple and he noticed that the guests were receiving dry khichdi. That was the prasadam that they were getting from the temple. And Prabhupada investigated it a little deeper. It was not just dry khichdi, but it was khichdi cooked by a hired cook. So he was very upset in seeing this, and he called the leaders into his room and he preached to them for 1 hour. He said, "What are you doing? Why are you serving dry khichdi cooked by a hired cook?" He said, "The people who come to the temple, they don't come to listen to philosophy or even have kirtan. They come mainly to take prasadam." So he said, tomorrow I want to see 5 opulent preparations, at least 5. And if you have no money, I will take money from the BBT. He said, "But this is Lord Chaitanya's program. And I've introduced this program in all my temples. And why you're stopping this?" So I know how he felt about the standard that there should be offering to the deities and to the guests in the temple. So that was one thing that I noticed, that in most temples nowadays, this standard isn't very opulent, and I feel it needs to be improved again, to go back to the legacy which Prabhupada gave us, in every aspect of his training. We should keep that legacy and not change anything.
You've actually produced a number of videos of how to actually cook original Vedic preps, yeah?
Yes, well, I've started, I'm not trying to impress myself within the society, but I want at least my followers to learn these Vedic preparations. So I'm doing it for their benefit mainly. But I'm tired of being used as a guinea pig every time I take lunch when I go to Ukraine or to Russia. So I'm asking them, look, here's a book, it's Adhiraj's cookbook. It's a bona fide book, it's got all the recipes in there. Take this book, it's in Russian, and learn these preparations. And I will also do some videos online, so just to encourage you. So yes, I've done free videos at the moment, and I want to do a few more within the next couple of months. At least perhaps 10 videos I will try to produce, just to encourage my followers.
And we can, for those who are interested in the video, we can find them here. So, you've also had a book that you wanted to kind of impress. You've been doing some publications?
Yeah, this is in the Lithuanian language. It's been printed already in Lithuania and Russia. The English edition is coming out in a couple of months. So it's called Inspirational Stories. So there are 64 stories. Different stories which I've taken from different traditions and religions, which, as it's entitled, Inspirational Stories. It's so that we can become inspired in everyday spiritual activities. And the caption here says wisdom, reality, and illusion. So this is the tree of the spiritual world where there's many fruits. Someone is picking the fruits of the spiritual world, and the reflection of this tree is within the river next to the tree, and someone is also picking the illusory fruits in the water. So reality versus illusion. Basically, this is the underlining theme of the book. Although there are 10 chapters with 10 different themes, the underlining theme is reality versus illusion. There are also many illustrations, at least 24 illustrations. And after each story, there's also a quality.
Will this book at any point be translated into English?
Yeah, well, it's already in English. We have to print it. I'm just trying to find a publisher to print it.
Okay, so anybody at home, they want to help Maharaj with his book publishing, then please call in. Okay, so thank you, Maharaj, for your wisdom and your time. I'm sure we'll see you again on the show. And is there anything? Or maybe you'd like to give the book distributors a little pep talk in finishing.
Yeah, well, I was giving a class yesterday morning explaining how Prabhupada himself had said that if the leaders of our society knew the contents of his books, they would never allow us to distribute them. Because, obviously the contents of the book is full of transcendental knowledge, and it's the opposite way of living from the so-called normal way of living in the 21st century, where everything is based on the bodily concept of life. So he was saying, that if the leaders knew, or the big controllers of the world knew the contents of his books, then they would never have allowed us to distribute them. This is one time he said like that. He said, but now it's too late, the books are already out, and this knowledge is being practiced by hundreds and thousands of people all over the world. So this time of the year, it's a good opportunity for those who are completely 100% on the bodily concept of life, meet a devotee to receive a book which will give the concept of the Atma, the soul within. This is Atma Tattva philosophy, the philosophy of the soul, which will give hope to the people who read, and even if they don't read, just having the book on their shelf, especially Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, they're not different than Krishna, so Krishna is present within their home, and it's just a matter of some time before that book will be read by a member of the family. So very auspicious, very auspicious. I've had many years myself of book distribution. I remember thinking to myself how wonderful it was to go out and distribute books throughout the day, and coming back to the hotel or to the temple, whatever the case was, counting the Lakshmi, counting how many books, reflecting on the experience I had throughout the day, and thinking, wow, I can't wait for tomorrow to go out again. So I wish you all success in your book distribution. I'm not able to go out all day long nowadays, but I certainly give my time to inspire anyone who would like to ask questions in regards to reading the books or distributing the books, and this I can offer.
Well, thank you very much, Maharaj, for your time. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.